like the first concert I ever went to was a Newport. I just heard Wes Montgomery. I mean, I hadn't heard him live, but he was coming. This is in Denver, where I grew up, and there was a Newport Jazz Festival, sort of a traveling show, and they were coming to Denver, and Wes Montgomery was, oh great, I'm gonna go. So I got the ticket, but he died right before the concert, so I never. But I went to the concert, and there was Thelonious Monk and Cannonball Adderley and Dionne Warwick and Gary Burton, and that was another. So then I'm here. I just had heard Wes Montgomery, and then I hear Gary Burton. What with Larry Coryell? Like completely. By this time, my mind is just beyond. I didn't know. But what I was going to say, then just a few months later, I saw Downbeat, and there's like Charles Lloyd is on the cover, so wow, who's that guy? You know, after he looks so cool and everything. So okay, I'm going to go see Charles Lloyd, and I went to that concert, and it was with Keith and Ron McClure, but not Jack. It was Paul Motion was playing. So, and that was the second jazz concert I ever went to. And then I go and I buy, wow, who is this guy, Keith Jarrett? And I go buy his Somewhere Before, do you know that album?
Yeah.
So, and that's the first time I heard, because Paul was on it, and Charlie, I never heard, that was the first time I heard Charlie Hayden. So then that, anyway, I'm sorry.
No.
But it's like so cool, like the way that all the connections start.
Wow.
It was like this explosion of stuff. I sent him a cassette or something, and I think he liked it. So he called me and asked me if I would do a duo tour. So I'm rehearsing with Paul, and then Eberhard. I went over to Europe and I did like a little, maybe 2-week or 10-day little tour with Eberhard, and that was kind of where we were just like playing free, and it was really cool. And then Harold Anderson calls me out of, like, I don't know how he knew about me, but people were saying something about me. So Harold calls, and then he asked me to come to this Molde festival. So this is all before I had even done a gig with Paul, but I was rehearsing with Paul. So I go to Norway to play with Harold and with Alphonse Mouzon and John Taylor. And when I was rehearsing with Harold, and Manfred called Harold and said, how is he, what does he sound like or something? And he gave me the phone, and it was like, hello, this is Manfred, and I'm happy you're, he said, I think maybe you should do a solo record. And I was like, what the, I was like completely, like all these things were happening so fast. It was just, so that was just I still hadn't really recorded anything, you know.
Wow.
But then finally in the fall, or in the winter of '81, and then Jan Garbarek called because of Eberhard. So with Paul, we did a whole tour. That was my first tour with Paul in Europe, and then we went in Germany. We did that Psalm record, and then I flew directly from Germany to Oslo to record with Jan Garbarek. So I did those two records just right, and that's where Manfred like totally, you know, he felt like we really connected.
So Manfred was on the recording studio?
Yeah, both.
How was your first impression on him?
Well, the first time before, I was just completely, because ECM was just, it was such a huge...
Even that time?
Oh yeah, for me it was, or before that, you know, that was years when those first ECM records came. It was something really special, you know. It's like every one of those records, you know, the very first Keith, like Facing You, or those Chick Corea solo records, or it was like, wow, what is, you know, it's like, it was like a whole, and whatever with Jack DeJohnette or Jack and Keith or Jeff, like every single record was something like an event or something. So the whole label had this kind of big mystique. And then by the time when I went to Boston, it was really, you know, Gary Burton's records and John Abercrombie, Gateway, that with Dave Holland, and it was just like, wow, this is some super special. It was like, so just the idea that I would be near that I was really intimidated, you know. So when and then with Paul, when I went with Paul, he was just like, wow, you know, he had all these ideas. I think we should play with, he was suggesting I do a duet record with Lester Bowie and stuff. Wow. I can't believe, you know, he was just so, but I was still kind of, I think I was still afraid of him, you know. He was very intimidating, but everything was going in a good, you know, we were all on the same wavelength, so it was cool, you know. And then I went with Jan, and it was all, but then things got more complicated, you know, soon after, you know, when I went to do my album In Line.